Views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Shooters Nation or our sponsors. Information provided on this show is not a replacement for legal counsel or professional training. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows.
Welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast, the talk show for you, the armed citizen. Join us as we discuss guns and gear, training, mindset and knowledge, industry news and buzz, and of course, the firearms culture. Be sure to join us after the show at shootersnation.com and become part of the Shooters Nation.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shooters Nation podcast. I'm your host, David Yancey, Janitor-in-Chief here at the Shooters Nation World Headquarters in beautiful Music City, USA, Nashville, Tennessee. This is episode 2, and that means we came back. We didn't give up. So I want to thank all of our listeners who joined us for episode 1, and most importantly, those of you who stopped in to visit us on shootersnation.com. And you told us what you thought about the first episode. Now, look, we're only going to get better as we keep going, but the feedback so far has all been positive and encouraging, and that certainly made it a lot easier for me to want to do this again. So I appreciate that. We're trying really hard to produce shows that we think you guys are going to enjoy listening to and that you'll learn from. I would love to hear from your thoughts and suggestions as we continue to move forward. And, how can you help us do that? It's pretty easy. I would just ask that you all visit us on shootersnation.com after this episode. Sign up and let us know what you think. Or you can always email us at shootersnationradio@gmail.com. So with all of that being said, I think we've got a really good episode tonight. And I'll be honest with you guys, I've been looking forward to this one all week long. I know who our guest is, and I've been pretty pumped up about this. I've been thinking about questions to ask. So anyway, with me here today are Dennis Ritchie. Dennis is a blogger, a recording engineer who has worked on platinum and multi-platinum albums, and he's new to the shooting world after having served behind enemy lines for 20 years in the entertainment industry. So, Dennis, thank you for your service and hello.
Thank you for your, that's funny. Hi, everybody. I'm here to knock the bottom out of the curve here because they say that if you want to be successful, you should never be the smartest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. Well, there's absolutely no danger of that here for me today. I'm kind of the innocent bystander. I'm going to be asking dumb questions and saying whatever it is that I think of. But these other guys are great. I'm looking forward to listening to what they have to say. I'm going to learn a lot here tonight.
Looking forward to it. I think that the innocence is gonna not last very long. So, also tonight, joining us once again, we have Mark Lancaster. Mark is the proprietor of Squared Away Customs in New Hampshire, a manufacturer of quality custom Kydex handgun holsters and carry gear. Mark is also a perpetual student of the gun and contributor to various podcasts. Mark, you and I are now, well, we're actually 3 for 3. I mean, this is our second 3 for 3. This is our second recording for the podcast, but we did a hangout last week with a bunch of the guys, so that was fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Look forward to another good show.
I think mercifully we didn't record last week, and that's probably good for a lot of people in their jobs. So. Yeah, it'll be fun. And then, so last but certainly not least, I am extremely pleased to introduce our very special guest, Ian Strimbeck from Runenation and Grey Hive. Ian, hey man, how are you?
How's it going, David? Really pleased to be on the show. Excited to be here. So again, thanks for having me. It's
absolutely my pleasure. So the reason I'm so jazzed about this, let me tell everybody a little bit about you, okay? And I know you're like a really humble guy. We had a chance to talk this past weekend, and I know that this is probably going to just kill you, so you'll have to indulge me for a minute.
Okay.
But everybody, Ian is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, so legitimately, thank you for that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and you conducted training to host nation forces and small unit tactics as an infantry rifleman. And as I read that statement, what that tells me is that wherever our government sent you, you essentially helped train members of that nation's armed forces in small unit combat.
Exactly. Yep. When I was over in the Middle East around 2007 to 2008, our job specifically was to be integrated into that area of operations, and we are a couple of the squads from my platoon were actually integrated specifically into a Iraqi police headquarters. So we actually slept alongside the Iraqi police, ate with them, took them out on patrol. Showed them basically how to essentially run their own city as safely and as effectively as possible.
That does not sound like an easy job.
It's not, especially when you have that language barrier,
right?
As well as unfortunately a lot of those individuals over there were essentially kind of lazy, and they really didn't want to do the job. They wanted us to do it for them.
Yeah.
And obviously, as you know, if we were to leave, which we did, if they didn't take action, then it would all have been for nothing. So they needed to take charge and really put, a foot to the pavement and do what needs to be done.
Something tells me that as we talk tonight, that theme may come back, that theme of motivating a person to take ownership of their situation. Yeah. Okay. So while you were there, you attained experience in combat and security operations. As a Marine, you held pretty much every position in a fire team, from the squad automatic weapon or SAW gunner. And that right there just sounds super cool because, lots of firepower. That just, who doesn't like that?
It definitely is. Just picture the concept of a belt-fed AR, essentially.
Right.
Shoot same size caliber as your standard AR, just belt fed, and there's really nothing better than going cyclic with a
so much freedom. That's awesome. All right, and so after that, you came back to the States. You spent some time working doors as security at various shady bars and watering holes. And those are activities which taught you, and I love this, and I've got to know more about it, but it taught you the culture and normalcy of criminal interaction, as well as the dynamics of violence and how having a multifaceted skill set is vital for survival. And I don't want you to answer that. We're going to come back to it.
Okay.
You've also worked for an executive protection firm in the greater Boston area, providing security for various VIPs, celebrity, and international dignitaries. And your bio said that you bring to your students the lessons you've learned and the knowledge you've gained from being in multiple high-tension environments. So really, as I read through this whole thing, and I'm looking at you right now on camera because it's a shame that the listeners can't see this, but I mean, you look like a normal guy, right? But I'm sitting here reading this, and I'm thinking this pretty much sounds like your real life background could be the opening buildup in a Hollywood script about a guy who has a particular set of skills, right? So.
Basically, and that is the idea of what I bring to students, and obviously I don't want to get too much into it now, but we'll just leave it as it's not just about the gun.
Right.
There's way more to that.
Well, so okay, Mark. All right, audience, I am not going to read the sign that Mark just held up. I don't know if he's accusing me of having a certain admiration bordering on love for Ian or not, but I feel like we've just met, and it's too early for me to pledge myself to you in that way, Ian. So, anyway, Ian, welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast. I really appreciate you being with us, on our second episode. And now I've got to know, what exactly is the normalcy of criminal interaction?
I guess you would really describe the normalcy of criminal interaction as something that would happen before your eyes that you really wouldn't take into consideration or process, I guess, unless you were actually looking for it. And what I mean specifically by that is that job specifically working, doors in those less than desirable watering holes at all hours of the night. really essentially taught me the skills, and how corny it sounds, of people watching.
Okay.
It's a skill that people kind of, I guess you would say, poke fun at or don't take seriously enough. But the idea of taking in information from your surroundings as much as possible,
Right.
will lead you to being that much more successful, whether it be for you to essentially leave the situation entirely if you see it escalating, or to provide you enough time to answer with some sort of tool, whether that be unarmed, whether it be if you are armed. Having that information before you that you've already taken it into consideration is just going to make you that much safer in the long run.
You know, as you mentioned that, I started thinking about a book that I've read, and you may have seen this as well, Left of Bang. And
I actually have not.
Have you not? Okay, so I'll have to do some quick Google foo on my phone while we're chatting. But you know, it wasn't a very lengthy book, but essentially it kind of expanded on what you were saying, that you know, we as a species, you know, we as an animal have generations of evolution built into us, and you know, that evolution, that experience over time has taught us how to subconsciously pick up on what's wrong with this picture, right? And so many times it seems like people ignore it because, you know, you see folks walking through the parking lot with their head buried in their phone, and they're oblivious to all the different senses that are telling them, you know, hey, that guy across the parking lot is watching you a little bit too closely. Now he's angling towards you and stuff, right? So, yeah.
Yep, that's I use the terminology borrowed from my good friend and mentor, Craig Douglas of ShivWorks. You'll see me, or hear me, should I say, quoting him and mentioning him a lot, probably throughout this podcast. I give a lot of credit, essentially where credit is due, to anyone who's directly affected my life as an educator. And Craig is definitely one of them. And the term that he uses specifically to describe that is, instead of, a lot of people use the term situational awareness.
Right.
In reality, you really can't describe how one awares. You know, like, how do you aware? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? Like, what is actually awaring? You know, so instead, I use the term task fixation. So throughout our day-to-day life, no matter what we're doing, task fixation is in a constant flux of narrowing or broadening depending on what specifically that we're doing. Say, for example, we're in our car checking our phone, updating our Facebook, whatever it may be. Obviously, our focus is narrowed, and our task fixation is narrowed specifically on that chore or that task that we're doing, versus we're done with our phone, we look up, we're in our car still, and we glance to our left or to our right. Now our task fixation has broadened specifically in that moment in time. So obviously that's a benefit. The obvious downside is when it's narrowed. Obviously we can't be aware, though, 24/7, 365, not, you're going to be way stressed. You're probably going to look like some schizophrenic weirdo. So we have to understand that, you know, at some point during the day, or at multiple points during the day, our task fixation is going to be narrowed no matter what. So just to be aware of that, and to have certain skills already trained in place to hopefully prevent us from having any more harm done to us than may already have been done.
So I'm going to come back to this because I do. And let me just go ahead and put this out there and be thinking about it. That almost sounds like it relies upon a person's innate abilities that are not taught. But I'm gonna ask later, and if I forget this, please bring it back up, or Mark, you know, feel free to remind me. Is that something that you can cultivate in your classes with your students to help them figure out when to shift their focus and how to turn that on and off, you know, when it's appropriate? So,
in my edge weapon classes, definitely.
Okay.
We talk on that at great length. Probably the first couple hours of the course, we actually don't even get into any type of grappling work or blade work at all. I talk specifically on the criminal archetype, or more specifically the criminal paradigm, how criminals work in their day-to-day life, as well as the idea of task fixation. In my firearm classes, like my rifle or pistol, I hit on it very briefly during the safety brief initially, but just to the time constraints and what we're there to actually do, I don't really have that much time to hit on it accurate at length. But obviously, if during the breaks or at any point during the day a student has specific questions about it, I'll definitely dive into it, just because I do feel that it's an extremely important attribute that people figure out.
We worked on it for a couple hours during the vehicular dominance class that we did, right?
Yep. So yeah, that's actually a good point too. So I actually teach a pistol specific class that deals with fighting in and around the vehicle, as well as modifying the concept of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and applying it inside of a vehicle, understanding and managing space, understanding to using certain pressure points of the vehicle, whether it be the headboard, the door, et cetera, to your advantage, et cetera. And obviously, before we get into the beginning point of the day, before we even go live, I talk specifically about the criminal psychology as well. So it's definitely brought up a few times in the class. And like I said, it's because mostly of the classes that I've been to personally coming up in the realm of education in the firearms world, as well as viewing it secondhand as an observer in the class or as an adjunct instructor. I just feel like it's not talked about too much, just because there's no there's no aesthetics from it, if that makes sense. There's no positive result in that moment in time for the student to see.
Right.
We can talk about it in theory in their mind, but there's nothing that they can physically see that makes them feel good about it, such as obviously in a firearms class, you can punch hole in paper or hear ding off of a steel. That's an immediate positive attribute to the student. But talking about how criminals work and how to, protect yourself and how to remove yourself from a situation so you don't have to go to guns isn't as enticing for the average student, unfortunately.
Oh my God. Now I want to take a class even more, because it sounded like in that you were saying that you teach people how to bounce people's heads off of dashboards and cars. And I want to know if I can bring students. Can I bring a friend?
It's like grappling and rock climbing inside of a car.
Yeah, I want to do this even more now. I've got a list of people I want to bring. Maybe they're not my friends.
There's a fantastic picture of Mark floating around with his neck completely cranked off the headboard. The next week after that, he was texting me I can't even move. I'm so sore.
My whole body ached.
Yeah.
It was absolutely brutal. Because what ended up is it's like August. And yeah, I mean, we're in New Hampshire, so it's not like it was 200 degrees, but it was probably 90. So it was hot. Oh, yeah. And it ends up me and the head of production at Squared Away Customs, my right-hand man, Corey, one-on-one in the back of a car, each with foam knives.
Right.
And Ian says, go. The doors are shut, it's go time. And, Corey's not a little dude, but he's not a huge dude. I'm 6'6", 260 pounds. So I've kind of got some reach and some legs to work with. So it's just immediately I would just pin him, squeeze him as hard as I could up against the wall of the car.
This sounds like the airing of grievances. This is the best thing ever, man. This should be like a team builder for companies. So, or maybe not a team builder.
Team building, absolutely.
Right.
But by the end of that course, the back seat of the car was trash, totally broken in half. I mean,
I usually do this class at my home range just because I kind of need a beater vehicle.
Right.
And the kind of the head of maintenance of the range there, I'm really good friends with them, and he actually got a beater vehicle from up north, brought it back down, and still to this day, you go in the back of the car, that the whole back of the seat is V'd in. It's completely bent.
This is great.
It's like a reminder every time that I use that vehicle of
my list of people I want to bring has grown, because I have people that I want to bring that I don't even like their cars. I mean, I have friends that that's what I meant. So
make sure they use their own car in that case.
That's right.
Exactly.
All right. This is crazy. I knew this was going to happen, right? So, I mean, we haven't even really gotten into who you are, Ian. And so I want to step back. I'm going to rewind mentally, because I'm just chomping at the bit here, because this is so cool. But before we get too much further into things, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and Runenation, and also Gray Hive, and teaser, spoiler alert, Gray Hive looks like an assembly of folks that are just absolute experts in what they do, of which you're one of them. So, man, have at it. Tell us about you and Runenation and Gray Hive.
Well, you pretty much already hit it off in the bio. I'm a former Marine, spent some time overseas. After I came back, I had worked for an executive protection firm in the Greater Boston area, protecting everybody and working in accordance with the diplomatic security service when the Dalai Lama was visiting in town, as well as, for one detail specifically, my principal, which is a term that we use to describe the specific individual that you're protecting at that point in time around that detail, was Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones.
Oh, no kidding.
Just to put things in perspective, it's not just being, a hotel security guard. There's a lot more involved in understanding the dynamics of actually doing executive protection work. So along with that, when I wasn't doing that, I was working at those various shady bars in Boston again as well. And while doing that, I used the GI Bill to complete and get my bachelor's in communications, more specifically in journalism, in a minor in psychology. So I was doing all that at once, as well as I kind of started in the education realm specifically. And while I was doing that, I kind of contracted myself out to other companies to work for up until recently. This prior May, that's when I stood up Runenation, created it. And the best way that I describe it is that it's a consulting and education company specifically designed in the consistent advancement and development of the multi-disciplinary tactician.
So what is that? That is a key. That's a term that I saw in your bio, the multi-disciplinary tactician.
So again, that's a term that I definitely, again, give credit where credit is due to Craig Douglas. That's a term when I was coming up in the education realm, and when I first heard about Craig and ShivWorks, that's kind of a big keyword that kind of opened my eyes to, again, and not just being about the gun. And that's what it's really about. It's being a multidisciplinary individual, being essentially a jack of all trades and master of none. So again, with a lot of firearm specific people, they are really kind of one-sided on that one tool, whether it be if they're a shotgun guy, if they're a rifle guy, if they're a handgun guy. They're just fixated on the tool specifically. When in reality, it shouldn't be just about the gun, not just about knife work, not just about having grappling skills, not just having good verbal agility on the street, not just knowing medical skills, and not having, unarmed skills like, boxing or Muay Thai. It's a constantly developing skill set that, again, is developed throughout your entire life. And so obviously we only have so much time to dedicate to these specific skills. We all have jobs, we all have time, we all have family. Okay, these are all very important things. So we can't obviously dedicate all this time to all these skills at once. So say, for example, okay, I've gone to, 6 months of pistol classes. I've gone to a pistol class every month for 6 months. Okay, I feel like my pistol skills are good. Now I'm going to move on to AR stuff. Okay, my AR is good. Now I'm going to move on to knife stuff. Okay, my knife stuff's good. Now I'm going to move on to, say, jiu-jitsu for grappling stuff. Okay, my jiu-jitsu is good. Now I'm going to move on to Muay Thai for my striking. Okay, and so forth and so on, until for the most part you're very well rounded out. And obviously that's going to constantly evolve and add on, just like, say, for example, a good example of what I use for this is, the layers of the planet Earth itself, different layers that we have, to the core, the center of the Earth, and it's constantly building up. So throughout your life, those layers are constantly building up onto each other.
Right.
So that, essentially at the end of the day, we're going to have a solid skill set that we can be productive as well as comfortable and confident with.
And so as I look through Gray Hive, it seems like they kind of take that same mindset and extrapolate on it. And you have individuals with various skill sets that can help a person become a more well-rounded tactician, multidisciplinary tactician.
Absolutely. So Gray Hive is a network of individuals that I'm very thankful to be branded with. We're a network of experts, as we like to say, that come from all different facets of life. Say me, for example, we have guys that are currently either active or retired from soft units in the military, as well as law enforcement and even sports science. So we're, from all different realms of the defensive sector, and we've kind of come together to really hone in and bring quality information back to the viewer or the reader, because I'm sure that you already did look, but if you haven't, for any of the listeners, we do currently have an active YouTube page, and we put out different kind of quote unquote training tips or different ideas, as well as topics that we put out, whether it be in regards to spalling, with having to deal with impact of rounds off of cover, or survival if you're caught out in the middle of the woods, as well as the difference between high and low ready with a pistol or a rifle. And we have so much more coming down the pipe this year as well as beyond. But like I said, I'm really proud to be part of these network of experts, and so far we've all kind of helped each other out, whether it be with growing our own brands, as well as kind of getting each other's classes out there, etc. So we're all in it for each other.
That's fantastic. I mean, looking through the bios, it looked like you couldn't go wrong trying to pick an instructor to teach you something, and just reading through the stuff, I felt like made me a little bit smarter, because it opens your eyes to just how specialized some of this knowledge is. And when you think about an element of building that cohesive package, all the strata of a person's approach to being prepared and going armed, you really could take an entire weekend or more of training and dedicate it to a facet, and you probably should. So that kind of really brings me to the next thing, right? What I was hoping that we could talk about tonight for our listeners is practical carry for the armed citizen. And so, as you might guess, I've got some questions written down to ask you, and I suspect Mark and Dennis probably have some questions also. So I kind of just want to kick it off. Can you maybe just kind of quickly go over your instructor style for us, and what is it that a student can hope to gain from you that they might not find somewhere else?
Sure. So I guess you consider my education style as very low key. You're paying money to come to me for instruction. So I'm not, going to treat you like a Marine Corps drill instructor. I'm not going to be screaming in your face. I'm not going to make you push if you miss a target or anything crazy like that. And unfortunately, I have seen that done, and I think that's silly and ridiculous. Because at the end of the day, you as the student, again, are coming to me and paying me a good amount of money, and spend 8 hours or a weekend with me, time away from your family, time away from a job, or just time away from just relaxing in general, and you've decided to spend it with me. So I'm going to give you 110% every single time. Because again, I'm not, and again, it sounds cliche, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm truly in it to educate you as the student, because that is my passion. There are, unfortunately, a lot of guys out there that think that just because they can shoot well, they have or think that they can teach other people. And the reality of it is, being able to teach people understanding adult education is essentially vital. Just because for the average adult, everybody learns differently, whether they learn by actually doing, or by hearing, or just by watching somebody do it. Everybody learns differently, and people really have to take that into account. And again, just because you're a good shooter, you're good at demonstrating, in no way, shape, or form makes you a good educator. And that also can be flipped. Just because you're good at educator, you obviously need to be able to shoot and demonstrate the drills as well. So there's definitely a a healthy balance. And I feel that, I kind of fit in the middle there, where I'm able to, be able to talk to, say, a female who's extremely skittish around guns, that may have,
Right.
have a bad experience with guns. They had a, ex-boyfriend that brought them to the range and handed them a Smith & Wesson 500 and just said, oh yeah, just hold like this. And then the thing goes flying, and now they're like scarred for life when it comes to guns, which has happened.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna say, I bet we've all seen that at the range, or yeah.
Versus having the guy that has been shooting for 20 years and he's just looking to take a new spin on things. So it's definitely being able to balance the both equally and put out just as good information to those individuals.
So I have questions, and I tell you what I want to do. I want to ask a bit about hardware.
Okay.
And then we'll probably take a break, pay the bills, so to speak, about midpoint, and then we'll dive back into it. But I think this conversation about hardware could take us a few minutes. So,
David, before you do that, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Ian, what size classes are you talking about? It's my job to ask the dumb questions.
Yeah,
Are you one-on-one, or are you, how do you do that? How's it work?
I usually max out at 12.
Okay.
There are other, like I said, other instructors out there that do more than that. But again, I'm not in it for the puppy mill type training model.
That's a good term.
I want to be able to have students safely online, and I can't manage. I personally just don't feel safe managing more than 12 students online at once, just because it's a lot of muzzles moving around at once.
Yeah.
And definitely more than 12, it just starts to get a little bit sketchy.
Well, that's really fantastic. By the way, I'm having a blast. I'm restraining myself from questions, but one of the things that happened to me after spending 30 years in the music business is I ended up teaching college. And so I understand that transition from doing it to having to explain it and deal with people. And that is really, really valuable, because like you were saying, there's a lot of bad teachers out there. And so I'm fired up about that. Was it a big change for you to have to do things to learn to teach, or is that a thing that kind of naturally came with your training over the years that you picked up?
I feel like it was a little combination of both. Definitely being kind of put in a leadership position at a young age in the military kind of helped modeled,
right,
personally as an individual to be able to teach others, but also leaving the military and taking outside adult education classes as well definitely helped mold that even more.
Very cool.
Just because obviously the vernacular and verbiage that we use in the military doesn't automatically translate.
Well, funny, some of the music business technical terminology, I would say, language, we had to change that for college students too. So.
Yeah, so it was for me. I don't feel that the transition was too difficult, but I definitely knew that it was there.
Ian, what you described sounded to me like, I've taken classes, and Mark, I suspect you're the same way. You've either taken them or you've seen them, where, it's almost like you're going to pay your money, you're going to go, and there's going to be a little bit of knowledge, but you're also going to get to roll around in the dirt and shoot from, awkward positions, laying on your back that you might not, it's kind of like fantasy camp for gun guys, right? And that doesn't sound like that's what you're offering, and that sounds great. The fact that it's knowledge.
Another thing that I definitely pride myself on is I always strive to answer the why.
Yeah.
Too often, personally, in my time in the military, it was always just shut the hell up and do it.
Right.
There was no answer to the question. It was just age-old doctrine that hadn't advanced with the times, and that's a whole nother beast.
Right.
Within itself. But let's just say that I was the black sheep when I was in the military, because I always questioned everything. And obviously people in leadership position really didn't appreciate a 20-year-old Lance Corporal questioning why we were doing it this way, when there was clearly an easier way to do it, but because that's not the way you do it on paper, it's the wrong way. So that kind of helped mold the way that I teach my students today is there's always a reason behind what exactly that you are doing, whether it be a technique or a specific movement. There should always be a why behind it, not just because this is the way that we do it. Just because, again, you're paying good time and money to be here, I'm not just going to throw random techniques and ways to do things without there being a solid reasoning behind it.
And the best time to answer a question is when they're asking it, because that's when they want to learn it.
Exactly. And a lot of times I have to kind of force students to kind of ask questions, because I don't really see myself as an intimidating guy. I know Mark's probably intimidated by me, but he's not. But,
Mark slowly shaking his head.
That is not.
But many times I kind of have to force questions out of them, just because for whatever reason they don't really have any at the time, or like I said, maybe they're insecure about asking it. Especially as men, as guys, which probably about 90% of the time that's who I have in my classes are other males. No one really wants to ask the question and be viewed as
right.
the dumb guy, so to speak. But I'll really try my best to kind of force questions out of them, especially when they're like kind of leaning on the edge, just because I want them to get full satisfaction out of the class. I don't want them ever to leave the class and say, do those techniques or movements back at their home range, and someone asks why, and say, oh, well, Ian from Runenation taught me this way. Okay,
right.
Well, why?
Right.
That shows that I didn't do enough as an educator to show them, and they didn't do enough as well to ask enough questions. So I always want somebody to leave and be able to explain to somebody else why exactly they're doing what they're doing.
So this is a good segue into some questions. And Mark, these questions are open to the field. So let's ask some questions. Why, right? Practical carry for the armed citizen. Choosing the right gun for you. We have listeners that probably have spent more money on guns that they've turned around and sold, because it was recommended and the hot cool thing they saw on the internet, and they bought it and they like, man, this thing really sucks, and they ditch it. You also have listeners that are new to this whole thing and they have no idea where to start. So where would you recommend starting? And maybe honestly the question might even be to start with, is carrying a gun for everyone? So
definitely when it comes, and I guess we'll kind of narrow it in specifically just to make it easier on handguns.
Right.
Just to kind of keep it nice and tight and narrow. So when it comes to picking out a handgun, really the best way is how it feels in your hand. And, I personally can recommend 100 different guns from here until tomorrow. But if you're not able to fit that gun comfortably in your hand and able to manipulate, if it has an external safety, a decocker, the magazine release, have good purchase on the trigger, be able to get, real high up on the back strap, then it's all null and void.
Why is that important? Why is that? Yeah, I know, but for the person that's listening to this and is asking, well, why is it important to get high up on the back strap?
Specifically with high up on the back strap, you want to have as high up on the back strap as possible to alleviate any type of high bore axis on the gun. So what I mean by that is why I'm personally a huge advocate on striker fire guns.
Okay.
Less, or should I say, sans any XDs, and we'll get into that later. But we'll say I kind of recommend the Smith & Wesson M&P,
okay,
or the Glock platform.
Okay.
Just because they're tried and true, they're inexpensive, they work. Like I said, they're tried and true. They've been around for a while. They hold up against a multitude of malfunctions, and they fit in a wide variety of people's hands. And again, with striker fire guns versus a hammer fire gun, let's say a 1911, a Beretta, anything of that nature where it has an exposed hammer, that bore axis sits higher essentially in your hand. Therefore, for follow-up shots or multiple shots, you're going to have to manage that recoil that much more versus having a striker fire gun, which, again, for your listeners who don't know the difference between a hammer and striker, a striker essentially is an internal hammer. It basically looks like a plunger. It's a firing pin essentially that sits in the back of the frame internally, so it's not exposed. You can't see it. Once that trigger breaks and that plunger goes forward, it hits the primer on the actual cartridge, and the bullet leaves to the barrel and essentially the muzzle of the gun. So with that plunger, with that striker, it sits, or should I say, it's just lower overall on the gun, versus a hammer firing gun, which sits higher, and you can't get your hand in alignment as high with a hammered fire gun. So you want that low bore axis to be able to get effective follow-up shots and not have to manage as much recoil on the gun.
So choosing the right gun that fits your hand,
yes,
may seem like kind of, okay, duh, for those of us that have done it before, right? But for the person that's walking into a gun store for their first time ever, and you walk in and you from side to side of the counter, it's a sea of guns, and the guy behind the counter may or may not be similarly minded as you to recommend something and walk the person through choosing what's good for them. Hopefully our listeners, that have never done this before will ask somebody that they know that's a shooter to go with them.
Yes.
And probably you need to take even their advice with a grain of salt, because I think everybody has their own, preference. But, from what you just said, it's critically important that you choose a gun that fits your hand, that the bore axis, the line, the imaginary line that you would draw out from the barrel forward sits as close down to the top of your hand as possible when you're gripping it. And that can make all the difference in the world between a gun that you enjoy shooting and that you can shoot accurately and reliably versus one that you leave in your closet and leave behind when you go out on the town, and now it's useless to you, or worse yet, you sell it.
Yeah, and again, I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. Obviously, if you already have a hammer fire gun or you're a fan of them, I'm not saying that that's it, you're ruined, you're never going to be able to defend yourself or shoot your gun. Just that I personally recommend, as well as what I've seen on the range as an educator, if I were to pick up, or if I'm going to go and purchase a gun that I want to depend my life on or the life of my loved ones on, I want a gun that I can essentially pick up, not have to worry about any type of external safeties to deactivate or worry about two different types of trigger pulls that you have, with the Beretta or SIG type platforms. I don't just want to be able to insert the magazine, rack the slide, and be ready to go and be able to shoot multiple shots on target and deal with the adversary as necessary.
So Mark and his strong love for
recently. Sorry to interrupt, David, but okay, I did a RSO gig for Ian during an all-female class at my local range here.
Okay.
And a girl in the class was her first class, new to handguns. She walked into a gun shop, told them that, and they sold her the most expensive gun in the case. They sold her an HKP-30.
And let's just say this thing did anything but fit her hand.
Right. So it's a huge gun, small hand, double action, single action, 9mm, with a safety and a decocker for someone that has no experience whatsoever.
Right.
So by the end of that class, she was running my gun, my Glock 19. She was running it 10 times better than she was the HK. And she sold the HK right after and bought herself a Glock. Like, for her, it just didn't make sense. She had the safety and a decocker. She had a double action trigger pull and a single action trigger pull.
Right.
She had a large grip, a big framed gun in general for her small hands. It was just all sorts of not right for her. And I can't help but think, like, and I don't like to think this way, but like I part of me can't help but think, like, when a an ignorant person walks into a gun shop and says, I'm looking for my first gun, and they walk out with the most expensive one, it kind of seems like a sales thing, right?
It does.
Like what did that salesman do to qualify her, to get her into that? Nothing about that HKP 30 would have worked for her. Like nothing. So like there was no qualification there. He was either a horrible salesperson or taking advantage, one or the other.
So
I can tell you from first-hand experience of working at a gun store, 99% of those guys that work there, unfortunately, do not know what they're doing. They're usually a friend of a friend that got in there, and they are just solely salesmen. I mean, the reason that I basically got let go of working there is because I wouldn't sell people the most expensive one.
So can I pause for a moment and like alienate maybe 10% of my listening audience? Episode 2, here we go. We're gonna torpedo the show right now. So if you work at a gun show, get ready, baby. You're gonna unsubscribe after I say this. If you work at a gun counter, and I'm talking to you, gun counter guy, and a person walks in as a new shooter and says, hey, I'm a new shooter. I don't know anything about guns. What can you sell me? If you do that to them, you're a jerk. You're right. I mean, you need to seriously check yourself and think about what you're doing as a human being, to a person that's wanting to buy a tool for their own self-protection. And you've just turned around and tried to make your sales quota instead of helping them choose the right thing, or frankly saying, I have no idea. I'm here because I'm, the owner's son. And I really wish I were out selling shoes right now. And maybe you ought to hand them off to someone else. So anyway, there you go.
I always kind of look at that too, it kind of falls into the same realm as like, the guy that color fills his slide and everybody gives him crap online.
Another 10% of our listening audience gone right now. Color fill audience gone.
My reasoning behind this, I think like Aaron Cowan did a good video on this. It's like, don't eat your own. So like we as gun people already have enough stacked against us on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They're going after our rights. They're going after our gun, whatever it is. We're already on an uphill battle. Why are we fighting amongst each other?
Right.
Like, help this lady out. Get her a gun that is going to be successful for her. Not like, thank God she did a class with Ian and I, and we were able to walk her through the proper way and the proper gun that may be a better fit for her.
Right.
Or she would have shot once or twice and be like,
before she gave up on it
and never done it again. Yeah. And that's one less female gun owner this country could use.
Oh my gosh. We've got like a whole episode I want to do about female shooters and stuff. So yeah, and that.
Then there was that other woman in the class that had the snubby. I think it was.
Yeah.
Yep. She had a 357 revolver. Yeah.
Oh, great.
J-frame.
Let's just say she was not happy. I actually think she switched over to my gun, or I don't know if Mark had another gun there by mid class, just because she was not hitting anything.
500 round pistol class.
That's
with a 5-shot
miserable.
revolver.
Right. I mean,
she was not too thrilled about that.
I'm not a small guy. I've got a J-frame air weight or whatever. It's a model 340 PD, and they'll take 357. And you know what I shoot out of that thing? Nothing. I may go shoot 38 with it, but 357, full house 357 in a small gun like that hurts your hand. It just does.
And again, another misconception with that type of gun, not to gonna go off on a tangent, but we're kind of still talking about the same thing with the choice of guns, is especially with a snub-nosed revolver. Very non-educated people, especially again, not to piss off your listeners, but in gun stores.
Oh, let's not stop now. Let's just go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just bomb it out. That females come in with, this is my first gun, whatever, and they'll recommend, the pink colored 38 revolver because
I was just thinking that.
Charter Arms.
Because it doesn't need a magazine. You don't have to rack the slide. Just
no buttons.
Throw your rounds in there and go.
Hey, little lady, you can carry this side saddle on your horse with your skirt, because that's what all women need is a revolver. Oh my God.
When in reality, a snub-nosed revolver is in my opinion, an expert's gun. You're basically shooting a long-necked 9mm out of an 1 7/8" barrel.
Right.
It's tiny. You have no sight radius, no nothing. You have all of that recoil that you're going to have to control.
Yeah.
And let's just not even talk about the trigger. Unless you send the gun away to get fine-tuned by a gunsmith, you're gonna have to deal with that horrible double action only trigger and the, as it's called, stacking the trigger.
That's right.
With those snubbies. So you're definitely not going to be,
they've got trigger pull for days. It's ridiculous.
At 50 yards with it for the average individual, and definitely not for the female shooter that has never shot before. You're basically just setting her up for failure, and that's unfortunately what that student in my class encountered. She was like, "What the hell did I just do?"
Yeah. So I mean, if you're that jerky salesman guy at the gun show or at the gun shop, and you're selling, charter snub nose 38s to women because it's a pink gun, and you take issue with me saying that you're a jerk for doing that, it's shootersnationradio@gmail.com. And I'll be glad to talk to you about it. We'll have you as a guest, and I'll tell you you're dumb on air. It'll be fun. Yeah. I'll get together a panel of people, and we'll walk you through why that's a terrible thing and why you should
David got death threats.
That's right. This is where it all started right here. Episode 2, folks. This is where I went into hiding and witness protection. Oh my God. So much we could talk about there. So I have to ask now, how important is caliber? When you're choosing a handgun, is 9mm it, or is it 45? I mean, I know that Mark's just wanting already to ask about the 50 Desert Eagle. So yeah,
you're just asking me to trigger everybody tonight.
This is fun though. Let's do it. Right. So caliber, I mean, the 1911, you get shot with a 45 and your arm immediately comes off. Right. So
exactly. No,
yeah.
For me personally, of what I carry as well as I recommend as an educator is in 2018, 9mm.
Okay.
Without a doubt, especially with the technology available today with bonded hollow point defensive ammunition. If you live in, green states, if you don't live in states that, with draconian gun laws, which is what I had to deal with the majority of my life by me having to live in Massachusetts. That's where I grew up. And now, thankfully, I moved to the Great White North up here in New Hampshire, and I can basically do whatever I want. But if you do live in those quote unquote free states, the smaller the caliber, technically speaking, say comparing a 9mm with 45,
right,
the more ammunition you can fit inside that magazine.
So is capacity more important than caliber, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay.
With the fact that the criminal archetype, the criminal psychology basically states that for the most part, majority of criminals work in pairs. So you're going to have to deal with multiple attackers. So I want as many rounds as I can fit into that gun. Again, obviously shot placement is key, but you can't go around and walking around with your 45 caliber gun holster thinking that I'm going to pull headshots off so I can shoot 8 attackers with my single stack 1911. That's just not how life works.
Right.
I want to put as many holes into the individual as possible so that they will hopefully expire, and then I can either move on to the next adversary, or I can deal with and take in other information from my environment, such as are my loved ones okay? Does someone need medical attention? Whatever it may be. Did law enforcement arrive? Okay, I'm putting my gun down, listening to their commands, whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is that I want as many rounds as I can fit into that handgun that I'm carrying on me. And also with that being said, I personally as well, I also carry a backup magazine. Some people might think that's a little crazy, but again, with the products that are available today, there's really no reason that, that you quote unquote can't carry all of that, especially with product developers like Mark out there that make kydex for the concealed carrier. There's really isn't, a logical explanation enough for me to not carry those, to carry that stuff on you.
So Mark, that's actually a good lead in to my next question.
Well, another couple things I'd like to touch on real quick about caliber though, is so not only do you have less, you get more rounds, but you have less recoil.
Right.
Yeah.
So follow-up shots are better. So, and it goes back to shot placement, winning the gunfight, not, quote unquote knockdown power, but you also have cheaper ammunition, so you can train more.
So let's just say that, I'm a new gun owner. I've gone to the gun shop. The guy behind the counter wasn't a jerk. He sold me something that fits my hand. He walked me through, choosing the caliber that works best for me and has the right balance of capacity and performance. I'm not going to use the other word because we all know that the other word just doesn't exist. Stopping power. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. There you go. There's another 10% of my listening audience gone. But, so I've done all these things and I say, okay, I've got to carry this thing, right? So, Mark, I think you and I probably ought to have a conversation at some point here on the show, really just talking about picking the right carry gear and something that works for you. But let's just say that I come to you and say, hey, Mark, non-jerky gun shop guy, convinced me that the right gun for me was a Glock 19. And I would like to carry that, but I have no idea how. Where do I start with that, choosing the right holster for my lifestyle? Can you even begin to dent that in a few seconds or a minute or two?
Yeah, if it's for the listeners, I made what we call the holster finder on squaredawaycustoms.com. So you can go there and it asks you a series of questions that are kind of in the back end is doing kind of like an if and an then. And then basically after you answer all the questions and depending on how they're answered, it brings you and lands you at a certain holster. And then that certain holster will be like, okay, we recommend the alpha for what you're trying to do. So you come to me, Mr. Customer says, I'm looking to carry my new Glock 19. And I say, inside the waistband or outside? And he says, outside. And like, are you looking to attempt to somewhat conceal this weapon, or are you looking to just use it at the range? Right. So that's two very different holsters, right? One that's high and tight to the body versus one that's drop and offset the body a little bit. And then, he answers that. I want it high and tight to the body so I can conceal it with a hoodie or a jacket. Then I would say, okay, are you looking to have a flashlight or a laser on your gun? And yes or no. So that depends. You would either want the Oscar or the Foxtrot model that we offer. And then when you get into the IWB stuff, there's lots of other questions like, is comfort more important to you or security? Are you going to be rolling around in what Craig Douglas says, rolling around in piss, beer, and broken glass, in a bar, and you don't need your gun to fall out, or are you just kind of a casual EDC guy,
right? And
you just need it to be comfortable all day. That's one. Do you need it to be easy on, easy off? Like for me personally, I go to the post office every day. I drop off packages. I can't carry my gun in there. I'm not going to be the guy that picks up a felony by carrying it at the post office. So I need something that comes off fairly easy. And do you want to carry on your hip or do you want to carry in the front? There's lots of different questions. And so the holster finder, we've really tailored to really narrow down, and it works pretty much flawlessly. And
it does. By the way, Mark,
feedback. What's that?
Yeah. By the way, I excuse me. I got online and checked everybody out so I could know exactly how ignorant I was. And I loved the holster finder. It just worked. It was awesome.
Good. Perfect. Yeah. Oddly, we have a fairly busy website, but on average, we have over 200 people go through the holster finder every day.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I suspect that you've got people and I hope that they're at least, looking at the catalog of stuff that you guys offer. So, we
could just get more than 1% to buy would be
right.
Great shape.
Right. But I have a feeling that's such a useful tool that people are going there and they're using it to choose other things. And I guess good on them. They're at least thinking about carrying, but really, I can speak from experience having, several of your holsters now. My wife has one, it's good stuff. So, all right. So guys, I tell you what I want to do. I think that, we probably need to take a break and we need to pay the bills and plug some of our friends here. But when we come back from the break, I would like to conclude the talk about hardware by Ian, Mark, what qualities should be important or less important when choosing a gun other than capacity and caliber? Is there anything else about a particular setup for a gun that you think is just this is a must-have if you're going to carry it? And then also I want to get into what about people carrying? What should they carry when they cannot have or just don't want a gun? There's plenty of it's in the news right now. We talked about it last week, teachers and the predicament that they, educators have, in states and school systems that don't allow them to have any sort of arm, a handgun or anything like that. What can a person carry in a non-permissive environment, if you will? So with that in mind, be thinking about that, and we'll take a break and we'll be right back. Hey folks, David here. I want you to think about the handgun you carry for your own protection, and I really want you to think about the holster you carry it in. Do you have trouble concealing your handgun? Does it feel like no matter what you do or how you dress, it's painfully obvious to everyone that you're carrying concealed? Well, I want to take a moment to introduce you to Squared Away Customs. Squared Away Customs is a manufacturer of custom, high-quality holsters for both concealed carry and duty carry. They provide a catalog of holster designs to choose from, and they are glad to take on custom work to design something to meet your specific needs. Mark and his team take pride in providing an excellent product at a reasonable cost. They work hard to keep delivery times short, and their number one goal is to ensure that their customers are satisfied. Squared Away Customs also offers a heroes discount to military, police, emergency medical workers, and educators. And for listeners of the Shooters Nation podcast, Mark offers a reduced pricing if you use coupon code Shooters Nation. Again, that's Shooters Nation as the coupon code. So, before you strap that cheap floppy store-bought holster on again, head over to squaredawaycustoms.com and treat yourself and your carry gun to something more worthy of the challenge. Hey everybody, welcome back to the second episode of the Shooters Nation podcast. If you're just joining us, I'm here tonight with Dennis Ritchie, blogger and former music recording industry professional, served behind enemy lines, as I like to say, in the entertainment world. Also have Mark Lancaster from Squared Away Customs in New Hampshire. And our special guest tonight is Ian Strimbeck from Runenation and Greyhive. So, gentlemen, thank you again for joining me tonight. Before we broke, I said that we would come back and we would talk about a couple of things and maybe just kind of wrap up on the hardware side of things. One of the questions that I was asked to present to you tonight was, are there, what qualities should not be important to a person when they're shopping for, their first gun, or even, maybe they've had a gun before and now they're looking for, the one that's really going to be their serious tool for their own self-protection. We've kind of talked about caliber, and we've talked about capacity, and we've talked about it fitting their hand. What are some things that they should just flat ignore as far as, here's a quality about a gun that doesn't really matter when you look at it as a tool?
Aesthetics, personally, for me. Obviously, once you've quote-unquote been in the game long enough, or you've consider yourself an experienced shooter and you've been to classes and, your personal abilities you are comfortable with and you're confident in your abilities, then maybe you can start looking into that because obviously you'll have the money possibly available to pay for those aesthetics. But right away, I wouldn't worry about, the fancy color of the gun, or if it has, fancy engraving on it, or if it has, slide cuts or whatever it may be.
What was that, Mark? Lasers, right? Okay.
Lasers, yep. Lasers, or basically something that you're drawn to just because of how it looks versus how it actually performs. Because again, a lot of those manufacturers may have crap performance or quality standards, and they try to make up for it in how the gun actually looks.
Eye candy, yeah.
And they appeal to the buyer via the aesthetics of it.
So it sounds like an ugly, reliable gun that fits you well and has capacity and performance is probably where you need to start and spend your money. Yeah. Okay.
I would think a gun that doesn't attract too much attention would be an advantage.
Yes. Dennis, that's actually a really good point. So I'm really good friends with Jeff Bluvman over at Practically Tactical. I've known him for years, and I was listening to their podcast, I think it was a while ago, and he brought up a good point where it dealt with people putting all these aftermarket aesthetics on the gun, like the infamous Punisher backplate, on a Glock, or, like shoot him in the head on the each extra point cover on the AR.
Watch for flash.
watch
Right.
for flash, or just these very corny and tacky statements that they're putting on their gun, when in reality, if they actually do have to use those in defense of themselves or others and have to end another person's life, that's not going to look too good in court.
Right.
When they have all this death dealing stuff on the gun. For me personally, I like to keep my gun as stock as possible. If not stock, then maybe an upgraded trigger or whatever it may be, maybe extra stippling on the frame of the gun for your viewers, or should I say listeners that don't know what stippling is. It's basically reinforcing the grip on the frame of the pistol itself.
It's like a texture, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. So it's a texturing process that they do to many different pistols out there. The most common are Glocks,
Right.
just because they're a polymer frame. They're very easily modified. And for me personally, I would much rather put money into getting a good quality, quote unquote, grip job done on the pistol than worry about the aesthetics of the slide. Because again, in that moment, if you're bleeding, if it's cold out, if it's wet out, if it's raining, whatever it may be, you have to shoot the gun one-handed. I want as much purchase and consistency of the grip as possible. And I can do that again by having good quality stippling on the frame already.
You know, you mentioned that, and I know that when you and I spoke this past weekend, kind of getting to know each other a little bit, we both know and have listened, or at least I know of, you may know personally, but Jared Reston.
Yes.
And Jared has a story about his own life and death, experience there as a uniformed police officer, and he kind of said, look, for my handgun, I want it to have good texture so I can grip it, stippling. And, he was talking about, he wanted a weapon light on it and night sights, and, basically everything else didn't matter. So that's very cool. All right.
And
so
for anybody, just not sorry to interrupt, David.
No, go for it.
If you don't know David, if you don't know Jared Reston's story, absolutely worth a quick YouTube search.
Absolutely.
And there's a Practically Tactical interview with Jared Reston that I probably listened to about 8 times now.
I listened to it.
There's so many knowledge bombs you can pick up from that 2.5 hour podcast. That
it is insane. I listened to it, and I made the mistake. I guess I said the mistake of letting my wife listen to it, and it is so eye opening. And I guess the mistake is because it shows how quickly an armed encounter can just get real, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. Google it. I was like white knuckled the entire time listening to this thing. I was driving through traffic listening to it, which was probably the worst thing for everybody else on the road, right? Because the adrenaline starts to pump up, and as soon as I got to work, I went in and I talked to a friend of mine there that's also a shooter and a concealed carrier, and I was like, dude, you have got to listen to this thing. And
it was like an hour and a half of the podcast.
Yes.
Was the story from start to finish.
Yes.
And then at the end, one of the questions was, okay, in real time, how much time was this? It was like about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. So it took him an hour and a half to tell this story in that kind of detail, and for him to retain that in much information, given what had happened. There's definitely, if you are a seasoned shooter, a new shooter, it's an amazing piece of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't want to ruin it for people, and there's just no way to do it justice. But perhaps that's a catalyst for the next part of our conversation tonight. And I do want to be conscientious of your time, Ian. So,
Absolutely.
What about, I don't know how much time you want to devote to this. I think it's important, and I almost don't want to do it an injustice by glossing over it. So perhaps, hopefully we can have you back on again soon and we'll talk about this. But, what about carrying when you can't have or don't want a gun? Is there any other gear that you recommend personally that's practical for a person? Is it like pepper spray, knives, stuff like that?
Again, it all comes down to the individual's confidence in their own abilities. Now, again, if you can't carry a gun specifically because of your job or the places that you go due to legal reasons, that's obviously completely understandable. You don't want to lose your job or go to jail for not following the proper laws. But there are still ways that you can go about defending yourself. Personally, for me, I'm not a big advocate on any type of quote unquote less lethal, specifically with less lethal, any type of sprays like mace or pepper spray. I've personally been OC'd before, which for your listeners that don't know what OC is, it's basically it stands for Oleracerium capsium. I'm pretty sure I'm murdering that word, but if you could theoretically wring out a red or a jalapeno pepper,
right?
If you could wring it out like a sponge and extract that actual juice from it, that's what basically OC is. It's a natural base compound. So versus pepper spray or mace, which is made in a lab, your body can adapt to that over time. Your body cannot adapt because it's naturally based to OC. So that was done to me in a non-lethal course when I was in the military. And I can tell you from personal experience, it is extremely uncomfortable. And I personally would have rather get shot in the thigh than ever get OC'd again. With that being said, I'm still not a huge advocate of it, just because there are a lot, in my opinion, and again, my opinion doesn't speak for all. I know a lot of instructors out there that specifically teach these skills. I'm not one of them. I quote unquote like to stay in my lane. But for me personally, I'm not an advocate of it, nor do I carry any type of sprays, just because there are a lot of things to take into consideration, like how to carry it effectively, how to access it, as well as taking consideration if it is windy out and whatever you spray, now you're getting backdraft with spray in your face and I have to deal with that. Some people that are hyped up enough, and I've seen, again, first-hand experience, people that are hyped up from excessive amounts of alcohol or drugs, that's not going to do anything for them. If anything, it's going to enrage them even more. And now you've escalated a situation even more than now that you have to deal with. But there are other non-lethal tools like impact devices that you can look into as well. But again, that's more in the unarmed specific skill set to look into, that, you can modify by, having a fist load with a flashlight, or the infamous tactical pens, or just having a folder not deployed and using that as a fist load, having the pommel out to use that as strikes. There's a multitude of options out there. Just because you can't carry a gun in no way, shape, or forms means that you are defenseless. And that kind of goes into my next segue. But before we kind of go into that, obviously the biggest thing before any of the offensive or defensive tools is definitely medical. That's a huge concept that people overlook, and thankfully a lot of my colleagues in the industry that deal with medical knowledge, thankfully a lot of people are understanding how important it is, and they are seeking out these individuals, which I think is extremely important, just because, again, as the cliche saying as it is, if you know how to make holes, you should know how to plug them. Right. And it holds extremely true. Especially for me, I personally live out in the sticks. It takes me about 20, 25 minutes just to get to the closest town. And there's just one big stretch of road that leads from my town to the next city. And I'm usually the first one on the road first thing in the morning. And there's been multiple times where deers cross the road. My wife specifically was involved in an accident where she basically had to run her car off the road, and she unfortunately T-boned herself on a telephone pole avoiding a deer. And in reality, you may be the first person to respond to that individual on scene until first responders arrive. So by having that equipment as well as skills already, that may be the decision maker if that person lives or dies in that moment. And you are more than likely going to be more apt to use those medical skills than drawing a gun and using it in defense of your life or others, especially as the average concealed carrying individual. So you have to kind of understand that the chance of you actually having to use it or should I say draw and use it are extremely slim, but having the equipment and skills for the medical context is much higher.
This is really that.
And again, because it's not aesthetically pleasing, because you can't put, you can't put holes in a target to demonstrate your medical skills, it's not pleasing to people. They don't want to pay X amount of dollars for an 8-hour course dealing just with medical knowledge because they don't receive, quote unquote, anything from it immediately.
This is really
I applied 8 tourniquets this weekend.
Yeah. That doesn't sound,
Okay.
that does not sound cool versus, hey, look at my target that I plugged away at all weekend.
Right.
Yeah, bandages don't go bang.
And kind of, again, going into the next segue, which beyond all of that, beyond the tools, beyond the medical knowledge, is the, as I call it, instead of mindset, I like to use the term mind grit. And what I mean by that is overall having an unbreakable mind. You need to have personally a mind that nobody can break. You need to have a will that nobody can break no matter what. You can have all the skills in the world. You can carry all the tools you want in the world. But if you're not able to use those because you get broken down so far, you've been stabbed, you've been, you've broken ribs, you've been mugged, and you're down the ground on your knees and you've just given up on yourself because you've never pushed yourself past your limits, then at the end of the day, it's all null and void. All you're carrying is expensive paperweights on your hips. In reality, you're putting yourself more in danger because you can inherently get those tools taken away from you and, used against you. And again, I've seen in Force on Force classes where people that have never been pushed past their limits have been putting these scaled, safe situations, and they just give up. You can just see it. They've, only been a minute and 30 into this evolution, and they just give up on themselves. You can just see in their face, their will is broken. They're just down and out, and they get their guns stripped away. And it is just, the most depressing thing you can see another man become is for another man just to give up on themselves. And personally, for me, that's something that I swear to myself that will never occur. And again, I don't expect everybody to go through the same day-to-day that I go through. For example, just to give you a layout of my day, personally for me, other than the weekends or other than the 2 rest days I have during the week, I wake up every morning at 3:30 in the morning. I jump in an ice cold shower. I get out. I go into my basement. I work out for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that's how I start my day every single morning. And depending on the day, I may go to a 2-hour or an hour and a half jiu-jitsu class. I hold Brazilian jiu-jitsu as a high priority for me personally, just because, again, as a individual involved in the defense of yourself or others, you need to get into the mindset of being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And again, that's not something that the average individual wants to do. Nobody wants to pay membership for a gym or, go to a wrestling or jiu-jitsu class where you're basically paid to get the piss beaten out of you every single time. But at the end of the day, if you're carrying tools that can potentially end another individual's life, you need to constantly, every single day, put yourself in moments of conflict in order to truly grow as an individual.
So we don't have a whole lot of time left with you, but and I hate that. I really hope that we can have you back. I'd have you back every episode if I could. But that reminds me, when you and I were corresponding, your email has a quote in the signature. Would you tell everybody what that quote is? And I think that really kind of ties together what you just said. So
the quote that I say often, whether it be in my signature or, I have it on my shirts, is "No one is coming to save you." And it holds, really true to me, as well as it relates to, again, a lot of my students, as well as people in the arena of self-defense, just because the reality is that, and a well-known instructor, Chappie, has said it, gunfights are milliseconds and millimeters. And, the average law enforcement officer is minutes away. So you do the math. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that you are your own protector.
Invest in yourself, right?
Exactly. You need to take the responsibility to do what is necessary, whether it be take a firearms class, whether it be your athletic skills might be a little bit slacking and your athleticism has gone down the drain. Maybe it's time to seek out a personal trainer or whatever it may be. Whatever it is, just become great at it. Become great every single day of your life.
There's something I'd like to touch on too, real quick, with all the classes that I've taken and the learning and the education that I've gone through and the shooting I've just done on my own. Like, it's really great to go to the range and just do what you're good at. And it feels good to be doing good at what you do good.
Right.
But I'll tell you what feels even better is going to a class, getting pushed, and leaving doing good at something that you went there sucking at. That feels way better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yesterday I sucked at this.
Right.
1,000 rounds later, I am nailing this. I am running my carbine with my left hand, and I'm running it well. And it doesn't feel like I have two left hands. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing it well. So by pushing yourself to do what's uncomfortable, you gain so much more, and you gain a lot in mindset because you really feel so much better about it.
So
I'd love to jump in just with one little thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
The guys like me, I mean, I spent my time sitting behind a console pushing a fader, and that is about the hardest thing that I do all day. I think it's, you mentioned jack of all trades and master of none, that was a good thing. I'd love for you to tell me the value of learning to do something a little bit in a lot of ways. I love the way you were talking about stacking things, building it in layers, taking it in steps, and how you can do this over time. But one of the comfort zones that we have is if we have something that we're good at it, we love, like you said, we love to stay there because it feels good. And we also fear failure if we branch out into some place that we haven't been before. And I want to hear you say that is still a valuable thing, even if you're not a master of it. Learning these things is a valuable, good thing for me.
Yeah, learning a new skill, regardless, is just going to make you a much more beneficial human being going back out into the world. And I'm not even talking specifically anything self-defense related. Just anything in life in general. Learning a new skill, regardless, is never a bad thing. Now, with that being said, you could be learning a skill the wrong way. Okay, so there is an inherent downside to that. But the reality of it is there's always something to learn. There's always something that you can do to better yourself and better your overall skill set.
No, I don't have to be perfect in order for it to be of value. I can learn some, and it's still significantly better than nothing.
Exactly. And the biggest thing, especially for men in general, is that we don't necessarily want to put ourselves in uncomfortable areas or areas that we know that we're not going to do well at. Just, it's a guy thing. Mm-hmm. In comparison to the female students that I've had, which have no ego involved, they're very good listeners. They do exactly what they're told. There's nothing attached, that they are inherently worried about, versus guys who get all bent out of shape if, the guy next to the left or the right of them is doing better than them, when in reality they're still better than they were the day before because they came to that class.
So let me stop for just a moment and ask. I know we're like really butting up against the time that we promised that we would let you out of here. And
I would definitely want to stay on to answer those questions from the
listeners. Okay.
Viewers,
okay.
listeners.
Yeah. We'll run through a couple of those, and let me ask this, Mark, Dennis, after Ian, tells everybody how they can find him and such, and we kind of wrap that up. Do y'all have time to hang out? We'll kind of roundtable this a little bit, talk about what we've learned tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I've done a lot of Ian's classes too, so I can give a little bit of his info too if there's any other questions.
Perfect. Yeah. So, Ian, some of the folks that listen have sent in some questions, and I've got 4, and I apologize to listeners. I'm going to just choose one right off the bat, and then we may get to another one to be respectful of time. But one of our listeners said, Ian, as you've conducted training classes, what are some of the most common things your students encounter that they thought they knew, but then they discovered they were wrong about. Or maybe you just want to talk about the top one thing that's the most prevalent. What's that one thing that everybody has the epiphany? It says, man, I thought I knew about this, and then I took a class and I found out I was wrong.
They thought that they were, they thought they were more horrible than they actually were, if that makes sense. So they came into the class with not a good sense of confidence about themselves or their abilities,
Okay.
but just a little fine tuning of maybe the gripping of the pistol, or how to hold the carbine, or how to manipulate the carbine. It was like night and day, just because it might not have been a skill issue, but it definitely would be a confidence issue, because the reality of it is confidence drives everything, especially us as humans.
Yeah.
If we go into a specific activity with a low confidence in ourselves, we're not going to do well at it. And that's not just in the shooting world, that's just everywhere in life. And I can tell you firsthand, from being heavily involved in fitness or in grappling in jiu-jitsu, if you walk onto that mat or walk onto that platform in the gym with a crap mindset, you're not going to be able to lift that weight you want, or you're not going to be able to get that good roll in or get those good submissions, just because you're already setting yourself up for failure, because you're letting, as I call it, that poison of self-doubt infect your mind, infect your body.
Right.
And you're just setting yourself up for failure overall.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. Thank you for that. So another listener asked, I'm paraphrasing. This listener said, I'm a senior citizen. I'm a lady. My physical strength is not all that great. My ability to get out and take training is not that accessible or that easy. For me, what skill would you recommend focusing on to make me better equipped to protect myself?
I guess really comes down to specifically is how you are staging this. I'm guessing that it's a pistol that she's talking about.
Right.
Is she carrying it in her purse? Is she carrying it on her body? Is she having it staged in her home for home defense?
I think it was home defense, kind of. It was the vibe that I got from that. Right.
So if you do have it for home defense, obviously beyond the going to a range and actually getting good trigger time, which for her specifically, I would dedicate trigger time specifically to practicing getting a good grip on the pistol, driving the gun out in a having a good stance, obviously driving the gun out and being able to get multiple hits on a body-sized target. That would be what I'm looking for.
Okay.
In a tactics type context, I would like to know that she's able to properly access the pistol in whatever fashion she has it staged. If she has in a quick access safe, to make sure she knows how to operate the functions of the safe. Say, for example, I have mine staged in a quick access safe where if I press certain buttons in coordination, a spring open door will open up and I'm able to access that pistol.
Right.
I want to make sure that she's able to actually access that under duress or a timed event.
Okay.
And understand that as an average concealed carrying individual, her job isn't to go out and be on the offense. Okay. Her job is to hopefully be able to barricade herself in that room with her and her loved ones, whoever it may be, have that pistol out in some type of ready position,
right?
Whatever she deems necessary, while being on the phone, either to her ear or on speakerphone with law enforcement, describing the situation, and again having obviously that door barricaded and locked, as well as understanding angles of the room itself, making sure she's not directly in that doorway, make sure that she's somehow off from that doorway. So if that individual was to burst through that door, she's not going to be right in that in that lane of threat, so to speak.
Awesome. Do you have time for one more?
Absolutely. Let's do
All
it.
right, last one. I'm choosing this one selfishly because I think it's going to be a cool question. As a U.S. civilian on U.S. soil, Ian, what is the most dangerous situation you've been in, and how did you handle it?
Again, it definitely goes back to the days when I used to work those less than desirable bars in Boston. One instance specifically was it was one night on the weekends where there was a bunch of gathering of different groups of individuals, and there was a heated conversation between one of the two groups, and ended up getting to a pushing match, and the bar itself was already at max capacity for the most part, so it was already pretty cramped in there as it was. Now it turns into a pushing match where me and my coworker of mine were in the middle of, and there ended up being a knife produced. One of the patrons of that bar that was involved in one of the groups ended up getting stabbed. Thankfully, my coworker was able to obtain that individual, pin him until law enforcement arrived, and we had to deal with the whole aftermath of law enforcement coming on scene with questioning all the individuals that were there, etc. And then I think it was either the weekend after that or at some part during that same month of that happened. That night, I think I ended up coming in later than I usually do, so I had to park at a parking garage that was farther away from the bar itself, someplace a parking garage that I don't normally frequent, that I didn't know the area well. And after my shift, I had walked back there, and I was on my way out, and there ended up again being basically a fight at the exit of the parking garage between two people, and pretty much everybody in that line of cars were getting involved. It was basically just like a mass fight for the most part. And I'm in the middle of it because I can't back up or go forward because, again, I'm kind of in this, you've obviously been in a parking garage, you know how narrow it is.
Sure.
That there's basically nowhere to go. So, and you could just see the tension building. And again, you don't really have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where this situation could go. At the core of it, humans are domesticated animals at our core.
Right.
And given the time and the situation, we will revert back to our animalistic tendencies, and that's what the situation was turning to. So, I had my handgun on me in the vehicle, and I still had it concealed, but I had attained that master firing grip on the pistol because I knew that if somebody were to smash my windows in and come for me, I wasn't going to be some statistic on the news. But thankfully, the situation ended up clearing itself out and ended up, being able to leave and go throughout. So
you say, to me, the thing that just jumped out, and pardon me if this is not what I should have interpreted from that, or extracted from that, but you don't always have to get involved, right? No. I mean, there is
especially when you're one out of, 60 or 70 people. What are you going to do?
Right. Take care of yourself.
You're not going to change anything except just either escalate the situation even more or become a victim of the mass mob. So,
well, yeah,
I don't want to say become or utilize the bystander effect, which, again, if your listeners aren't aware, it's a term used in psychology to describe what you see often when you see those quote-unquote world star videos with fights that occur on the street.
Everybody's videoing it. Nobody's jumping in.
Nobody's actually going or, getting into the situation.
Right.
It's called a bystander effect. It's basically someone's expecting somebody else to do something, but obviously nobody does because no one wants to get involved due to legal reasons. And the biggest thing beyond all of it is fear. People are scared to get involved, whether it be, and again, going back to confidence in their abilities, in their strength, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, in today's society, because everyone's afraid of getting sued, no one wants to get involved because of, again, the legal ramifications.
And what an interesting way that we've come kind of back full circle to the fact that the bystander effect, nobody's coming to save you.
Exactly.
Ian, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Anytime. I really enjoyed it. I know the listeners have to have that, I can't wait to get this thing edited and published just because this was so good. So,
Awesome.
Dennis and Mark and I are going to hang out and we're going to talk. We're not going to talk about you, but we're going to talk about you after you've gone. It will be nice. But in the meantime, tell everybody how they can connect with you after the show. How can they find you online?
Sure.
And upcoming classes that they might want to avail themselves of.
Sure. So, my website is runenationllc.com. My Instagram is the same, Runenation LLC. Facebook, same thing. And my Twitter, I really don't use my Twitter as habit just to have it, but I'm most active on my Facebook and my Instagram. As for my classes, they are always up to date on my website. I have a course calendar right on the homepage, and again, I update that as frequently as possible. This month, I have my point-driven strategies class, which is an 8-hour course dealing specifically with the entanglement problem. And the solution is utilizing some type of edge tool. That's at my local jiu-jitsu gym here in New Hampshire. In April, I'm actually going to be headed out on the 14th and 15th to the Pro Gun Club in Las Vegas. So I'll be there for the weekend teaching a carbine class on Saturday and a pistol class on Sunday. On the 21st of April, I'll actually be at Mark's range there, local to him, up in Enfield, New Hampshire, teaching a one-day pistol class. And then at the end of the month, the 20th and 29th of April, I'll be out in Timber, Oregon at the private J-Rock range teaching my level 2 carbine class on Saturday, my level 2 pistol class on Sunday. And then moving into May, we're pretty stacked there as well. So pretty much for the remainder of the year, I'm pretty stacked every single weekend when it comes to classes, either here locally or across the U.S. And again, if you don't see a date, time, or location that works for you, if you actually go to my courses page, there's actually or go to the courses drop down, there's actually a page dedicated to being a host. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a little form you fill out with the, your name, the range name, the date you're looking for, et cetera, so forth. Again, if that time doesn't work for you, I'm always willing to travel. You just need to figure out some logistics between me and you as the host. That's all.
There's a lot of opportunities there for people to sit down with you and spend some time learning. And I can tell you from the very brief conversation that we've had tonight, it's worth it. It's got to be worth it. So
there's a lot of good stuff on the blog too.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. So also on the website, there's I have it labeled as mind fuel. It's kind of my little rants when it comes to ingraining that unbreakable mind. Again, I have a passion for writing, so every now and again I'll kind of get something inspirational going, and I'll just kind of plug it away on there as well.
That's fantastic. All right, so everybody, we're gonna make sure that we have links to Ian's websites and his social media presences. You can check those out. Probably I'm gonna make sure I get those put on our Facebook page. So that's facebook.com/shootersnation. And then, we're working to get the show notes published and we'll get them out there. So we'll make sure that we've got, all the information out there that you need to find Ian. Again, his website is runenationllc.com. That's RUNE runnationllc.com. And also your cadre that you're associated with, Greyhive, GREYHIVE.com. And honestly, you can do like I did. You can go out and hit the Google machine and find Ian Strimbeck, and it takes you to all those cool places too. Ian, thank you, sir. We've kept you far later. I apologize to your family.
Don't worry, man.
I thank you for sticking out with us.
I'm always down to, having people, hear what I have to say.
Yeah, no, it was valuable to me, and I hope that others did. And I can't fathom how they didn't get something out of this. So this is fantastic. I really look forward to having you on again. I hope that we can get together with you. All right, fantastic. All right, Mark, Dennis, we'll let Ian go, and we'll take a break here for a minute, and we will come back in just a few minutes. So if you're listening, please stick around. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shooters Nation podcast. Wow. If you're just joining us, you seriously need to rewind and go back about an hour and listen to the interview that we did with Ian Strimbeck from Runenation. But I'm here still with Mark Lancaster from Squared Away Customs and Dennis Ritchie, blogger and former music industry recording engineer. There's so much going through my brain right now, guys. That first of all, what a great guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I feel like we could have talked to him for hours, and obviously we couldn't do that. I guess let's just kind of roundtable it for a few minutes before we conclude tonight. What are the one or two things that really stood out to you from that conversation?
For me, it was the mind stuff. I mean, you know me, David. I get off into brain stuff. I'm a little bit wiggy about that. And so the training thing, one of the things I've realized is that anytime that you have a load of adrenaline on you, that your brain is just not working right. And all of the guys that I know who do something for a living that involves adrenaline, you have the choice of getting stupid or getting trained and making it automatic. And all of those guys do training. And his idea of becoming a jack of all trades and learning how to deal with that sort of stuff, to focus. Mark, I mean, you've taken some of these classes. One of the things I wanted to ask, one of the things I've done, I played around with, was to be a pilot. And for a while I took classes, and one of the things that you have to do is constantly change your focus from one place to another. You just scan and you look at all the gauges, and you look left, center, right, and check things over and over again as a pattern. What are some of the things, some of the ways to get this awareness, besides obviously putting down your cell phone? I mean, are there scanning techniques? Is it a matter of looking for the one weird thing that suddenly sticks out? What are some of the things that you learned in the
For me, I think what helps me is by keeping up on events and realizing that this isn't a world full of snowflakes and daisies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's evil everywhere, and it's more prevalent I feel like it's more prevalent to me as I grow older because of social media and because of TV and because of satellite radio and whatever it is. You hear about it more. And I'm not sure that it's happening a whole lot more, but it's in your face a whole lot more. Probably a lot to do with social media and the fact that I'm having conversations with good friends of mine scattered across the country right now, and we're able to do that, and we're able to have this conversation. But I think rather than put blinders on it, put it in your face and see what is happening around the world and see what people are capable of. And that, is huge to me, because it just puts me in a mindset like certain people can't be trusted, certain situations can't be trusted. And I always kind of have I'm not some paranoid fool, but at the same time, like, if I have the opportunity to sit with my back to the wall, I'm going to take it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if I have the opportunity to keep my daughter on my left as we're walking, and I'm going to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's simple little things, and it's just as simple as, oh, you have to worry about all this stuff. It's like, well, you have to worry about carrying your cell phone. That's no different. It's just one more thing in my day.
Do you think you can train yourself to see it coming? Can you see it coming if you're just paying attention? Or, I mean, one of the things that freaks me out is it always happens really fast and surprising. And if there are things that you can train yourself to do to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you can see it coming, but you can potentially be more prepared for when it happens. That your reaction is you're a little bit more predisposed to make a smart move versus oh my gosh, is this what's really happening right now? Oh my gosh, is this happening? Versus I see this and I'm reacting immediately versus being starstruck by the fact that something bad is happening in front of you right now,
preventing you from freezing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And who knows, like nobody can say like, that's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to be that guy that freezes.
Right.
That deputy at the school in Florida probably didn't at one point in time think that he wasn't going to be able to enter a school that a gun was going off.
Right.
He took that position knowing that was a potential. That's why he's there. Right.
Right.
And he was unable to go in. And we don't know the story behind it, but what we do know is that there was gunfire. He heard it because he radioed, and he didn't enter the building.
Right.
Yeah.
And he maybe could have done something about it. Like there's a reason he didn't go in there.
Yeah, I've heard that there might have been instructions for them to stage outside, but I don't know. But that you're right. You can't know what you're going to do.
Even with that.
Yeah.
Me knowing, I have a 10-year-old daughter and I have a 28-day-old son.
Mm-hmm.
And even knowing that, I'm not in a situation, and I'm really not trying to quarterback this thing from my office chair right now. But I cannot imagine sitting idle, hearing AR-15 fire in a school,
right,
knowing I could potentially do something about it,
right,
and just waiting, even because of an order.
Yeah.
Right.
Lose my job. I'm saving these children, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trained. I know what to do in this situation. I know how to best handle the situation. This is why I'm here. Order or not, man, I'm going in. I think we don't know, right?
Yeah.
I'm not.
If nothing else,
situation.
And nothing else disrupt the progress, because I mean nobody ever challenged him in the school, but
right.
And that's exactly it, Dennis. It's like all of these things, they're never challenged. And as soon as they do get challenged, what happens?
Yeah.
They shoot themselves.
Right.
Because they are weak. They have no backbone.
Right.
And they have no training as to what they're doing.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. They know what they can learn on YouTube, and that doesn't teach them mindset. It doesn't teach them how to defend themselves. It teaches them how to create chaos. And it's horrible. And
I mean,
they get resistance, they fail.
Always. Yeah. And that, so here's what I would offer to that. Some of the classes I've taken in the past, we went over the OODA loop, OODA. And it's it's.
Explain that to me.
Sure. So, United States Air Force Colonel, John Boyd, came up with this loop, and OODA is an acronym that stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And it's a decision cycle that pilots go through. And so, both actors in a violent confrontation have an OODA loop running in their brains subconsciously. The person that's perpetrating the violence, the aggressor, has his OODA loop or her OODA loop running, and subconsciously they're observing, orienting, deciding, and acting. And then the person that, the responder, the hero, if you will, has their own OODA loop. And the objective of this, that Colonel Boyd, his observation is that doing anything is better than doing nothing, because you interrupt that other person's OODA loop. And that's why in a lot of classes, at least, it used to be taught that in a shooting situation, start moving, right? If that person's coming at you, you give them something additional to think about. It could be movement. It could be you're now moving diagonally away from or towards them. It could be you're shooting at them and you're really giving them something to think about, but you've done something now to interrupt their strategy, and, it screws them up. And so, again, we don't necessarily want a Monday morning quarterback, the actions of the sheriff's department in Parkland, Florida, even though I think that, what they didn't do was completely reprehensible. If they had just done anything. It would have been better.
Pull a fire alarm.
Pull a fire alarm. Yeah. So,
yeah, if you really, one of the things I've learned, if you really want to slow things down, make people think.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. Absolutely it is. And give them something to think about. Ian made the comment earlier about capacity being so important with a handgun. And, I look at it this way. Every bullet that's in that gun, if we're now in a firefight and it's a fight for my life, I want to give you as many things to think about as I possibly can. And each round that's in that magazine is one more thing for you to consider. And then that's why delivering shots with accuracy on your target is very important. The human body is surprisingly resilient and unimpressed with handgun bullets. But, you just keep pumping them into that target. You're giving them something to think about. And hopefully what you're giving them to think about is overriding their ability to effectively manipulate the trigger or swing the axe or stab with the knife or whatever else that they're trying to do to you.
Affect innocence.
Yeah, affect innocence.
And that also makes up for your limitations that happen when you're just suddenly blasted with adrenaline and you're shaking and your brain stops working. And
that's the other thing, Dennis. Is so I have a Glock 17 and I've got 18 rounds in it, 17 in the mag, 1 in the pipe. It gives me more opportunities to miss in that high stress situation, right? Mm-hmm. So if I have a 5-shot J-frame, if I'm missing 2 times, I'm running out. I am almost done.
Right.
Well, aiming that accurately takes some time too, which means you're more of a target.
And so I've just now, to make myself look smarter, I've pulled up a quote that I think I'm going to close with tonight. So I'll come back to that. But, I mentioned Left of Bang. It's a book by Jason Riley and Patrick Van Horn. And you can find this thing on Amazon. Yeah. They talk about, Dennis, your question a moment ago is, do you find yourself being aware of things and what have you? And I'll offer this. I think that one of the things that they make a case for in this book is that most survivors of a violent experience of some sort always have something that they offer the investigator in hindsight that says, well, I noticed such and such was off about this person. Or, looking back, I realized that person was in the periphery of my vision, following me along, on the other side of the street. Or I noticed that car was following me now that I think about it. And, what they're saying is that if you stay left of bang, if you stay ahead of that bad incident, using your instincts and being aware of these things that your body naturally tells you is kind of hinky about a situation, it's good. And frankly, we didn't get into it, at all tonight, but there's such a stigma, it seems like, for it's a bad word, profiling, right? Mm-hmm. But we all profile to a certain extent, whether it's you're profiling that young boy that showed up at your door to take your daughter out to the dance, or you're profiling that car that seems to be driving slowly down the street in the morning, and you're like, well, that car's unfamiliar. You're profiling, and it's not terrible. Profiling, for the sake of discrimination, certainly is, and I wouldn't be an advocate for that at all. But profiling is a useful tool, which is why the law enforcement and military communities use it and rely on it so much. And I think that we, as cautious, prepared citizens, should enact a little bit of profiling in our lives and just be observant and contrast, is what I'm seeing normal, or is it abnormal in some way, and should I now be paying more attention to it for my safety and the safety of those around me?
Well, it's a big problem in society today, right? See something, say something. But people saw, what was it, San Bernardino? Like they saw that they knew something was going on, but they were so worried about sounding racist,
Right.
they say nothing.
Right.
And society has driven this into us today.
Yeah.
Like it's better to not say anything and not be racist or a bigot than to potentially save lives.
Yeah, and look what it's doing is it's causing victims and collateral damage. So
I've got a book, one of my favorite books. It's called Survivors, and it basically goes and analyzes how and why people have survived different things. And if you think about it, for however long humans have been here, the survivors have been listening to those little clues, those little voices, the instincts that stop us. And if we can hear those things over the noise of our training and our programming, then I think that we have a better shot at survival.
And over the I'm going to call it the compression of our civilized lives. If we allow ourselves to hear that thing over the stuff that we're told to ignore, it's there. It's there for a reason, and we should take advantage of it. Something else that I really we ran out of time, and that was regrettable with Ian. But Mark, I think you and I have kind of kicked this around a little bit in the past too, so we can talk about it briefly. And I want to do a whole episode on this at some point, but. One of the listener questions that we couldn't get to was, how much do you coordinate with your significant other or work and train with them to make sure that they know what to do and how to react if something, quote unquote, goes down, something bad goes down while you're out together. And do you have code words or signals or anything like that? And, wow. I mean, that's a whole episode probably, but I don't know, Mark, what do you think? I mean,
it would have been a great one if Ian, if we had more time with Ian, because I know for a fact that he has, and I'm not sure if it's on YouTube or it's on Facebook. I think I saw it on Facebook. And Ian has content where he's displaying this sort of thing at a range, a completely safe situation, practicing with live fire with his wife.
Right.
Like right down to even arm around her, backing up, gun on the threat. He trips on a rock, falls, pushes her out of the way, and he's still engaging the target. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, he's got some good content on this, and that's it's an absolute, plenty to talk about in this conversation. But then the code word thing is another important thing. I mean, if you think you're trained enough to be at a point or mindset enough to be able to see what's happening, the code word thing is fantastic. I know a good friend of mine and hopefully a guest on the show soon, Mike Cicino. He's been an instructor for a long time. He instructed for state police. He's been a chief of police, deputy chief of police. He's been in the industry a long time, and I know he taught me. He's got the Mozambique drill, which is 2 to the chest, 1 to the head.
Right.
He's got a code word that's not even a word that he and his wife have.
Is it like a physical signal or something? Or
he holds up 2 fingers with his left hand, puts it on his chest, and then he holds up 1 finger with his right hand, puts it just above that.
Wow.
And he taps his chest with them. And if she sees it, she knows it's time to 86, time to hit the floor, time to get out of Dodge, one or the other.
Yeah, I mean that's
about to go down.
God, we got to do an episode on this. And Mike, if you're listening, buddy, we're going to get you on here. I think that you've got some information that would be very valuable to our listeners too. So we need to make that happen soon. But
Mike's got 35 plus years of content for us.
Like an hour or two is not going to be enough. I know that, and just let's say it was with Ian, it wasn't enough. My wife and I've talked about that, and now it's complicated because we have children, and our children are small, and I'll give you an example. Right now my biggest challenge with my daughter is keeping her from being excited, about seeing me coming home from work and running out in the street if she's over, with the wife at the neighbors, and I tell her stop, and she doesn't, and then we have to go into that, and before you know it, she's in tears because I've told her no, go back, wait. Do it, do what you're supposed to do, look both ways and come over. And of course, all she wanted to do was see me.
Right.
But I'm trying to save her life because one of these days a car is going to be coming. And so, it's a hard thing to do, but I guess what I'm getting at is that, the added dimension of having children, and there has to be something that everybody has talked about and agrees that this is not a game. I will never say or do or give this signal for fun. If I do it, it's because it's real, and here's the plan. You're going to get to the ground, or you're going to run for the exit, or you're something, right?
And the thing about it is, David, like I think like having a overall plan is always the best,
right?
But there's situations. I think that we talked about the situation that I was in, my wife, and I think it's too long to bring up in this roundtable.
Sure, right? Yeah, we'll do that sometime. But yeah, no, the bar situation,
the situation I was in a year or two back, where all of my planning and everything went to hell in a handbasket, and the dynamic of the situation dictated something that I wasn't ready for.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like that's part of it. Don't just be like, well, I've got a plan, so we're good.
Right.
Right. Because you're not, because you never know. And like, no matter how much you think it, you never know when the S is going to hit the fan. And I think that's just a huge part about it, is you always need to be ready for the unknown. Predictably unpredictable situations are going to happen.
Dennis, I think that kind of goes to a question that you were talking about at our break about training and why doing it.
Yeah, because it's fun to put your hand on a gun, and it's fun to buy guns, and it's fun to shoot things. But all of the things that we've been talking about here, these are all mind things, and you can't buy it. I mean, you can buy training, but you have to absorb it and learn it and put it into practice. And the gun is just it's just a tool. Without the training, it's just an object. Like as Ian was talking about, you could end up holding a thing. I've forgotten exactly how he put it, but it was something like it's just a useless hand paperweight,
right?
Without the training.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that with this brain stuff that I get wiggy about, I've learned that we think slowly, really slowly, but when we can train ourselves to be fast. And like I said, anytime you stop to think, we have to think, but anytime you can train that routine, it's going to be far faster and far more accurate. And, the first few times I got in a situation where there was adrenaline involved, I was the stupidest person that I have ever run across. All my training, I was like, I could go and list everything that I'd ever studied about it. And then after it was all over, I sat and thought, well, I forgot every single thing that I ever learned. It was because of the adrenaline. And I think getting yourself in, like he was talking about, getting stressed in a situation, I think that's important because it basically activates that adrenaline and gets you used to thinking in spite of what your brain is trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's that old line, you never rise to the occasion, you resort to your highest level of training.
Right.
Period. The human does not rise to the occasion. You are not going to perform better than what you know how to do. Period.
One of the things I like doing is reading. I'm fascinated with reading about the conditioning and the training and the investment that our military's top tier people subject themselves to be ready for a situation, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a book. I want to say that it was maybe one of the books that covered the same SEAL team or class, not the team, but the SEAL classes that like Marcus Luttrell and maybe even Jocko Willink and others like that had gone through. And the author was talking about, essentially it's like this: the human brain, they subject these warriors to immense stress as part of the training, because in a real stressful environment, your mind, it's like an old 8-track cassette player, right? When there's the normal track that your mind's playing all through normal, sedate, comfortable life, but when it hits the fan, your brain flips to that other track and it starts playing what you've recorded there. And if what you've recorded there is empty white noise, you're sunk. But if what you've recorded there is, okay, it's all going wrong, Everything's gone off the skids. It's violent, it's loud, it's noisy, it's chaotic, but you've trained in that. Guess what? Your mind starts playing that back, and now it's familiar, So
absolutely.
I think, that's kind of sort of where what I took away from tonight is I can go to the shooting range and I can take, ideally I'm going to take just one gun. It's going to be the one that I'm carrying, most often, and a couple hundred rounds of ammo, and I can blast at targets, and I can even move around, because I've had some training classes or I've watched videos on the internet and I do drills, and yeah, sure, that's a little bit better maybe than the guy that just stands at the range and squares off to the target and pulls the trigger and makes a tiny little hole. But that is not in the same league as the training you get from an instructor-led course where an instructor is pushing you outside of your comfort zone and encouraging you to consider alternate scenarios that are not perfect. You're at a disadvantage. You're on your back. You're on your side. There's people in the way. It's chaotic. Whatever. That static training that I do, just pulling the trigger, is not enough to get good at it. You have to go seek out training from somebody who's going to elevate your knowledge and your standards for yourself.
Yeah. It's like the difference between reading a book about it and having another brain there. You just need another brain, somebody that's focusing on the training and not on trying to figure out what you're doing.
Professional athletes do this all the time. You can be at the top of your game as a quarterback, or a pitcher or whatever, or a gymnast. But until you go seek out specialized training from somebody whose whole mission is to take you and make you better, you're at a disadvantage. You may eventually get there. You may eventually somehow stumble across proficiency, but you can probably.
I'm not even sure you would get there. Well, it's oddly enough one of the things that musicians do. Really great musicians. One of the things that they do, if you're satisfied with your performance, you don't get great. You have to be dissatisfied with your performance, and that drives you to be great. But when they start getting comfortable, they will hire someone, even though they're like fantastic. They'll be like the top people in their field. You think, oh my gosh, this person, what could they possibly learn? They'll hire somebody to poke at them and lead them into another direction just to get them outside of their comfort zone, because they know they need to learn more and they're not sure what it is they need to learn. So they hire somebody.
I'm sure that people are listening to this thinking, oh my God, wasn't it enough that I bought a gun and I spent $500, $600 on that? Isn't it enough that I, got my concealed carry permit and I paid $200 or so for that to happen? Isn't that enough? Aren't I equipped? And I would just offer this, right? Yeah, no, right? I mean, yeah. Short answer, no. Okay, we're done. Right. No.
David. No.
Right. All right. So I'm gonna finish alienating our listeners. Adding on what Mark said about no, and he's dead right. No, it's not, right? It's not enough, because this is, okay, this is more important than learning how to play the guitar at a better level, or how to throw a football further, or, whatever. This is life and death. And I mean, this is going to sound really dramatic, and for 99% of the population, they may just roll their eyes and, click, okay, I'm going to a happy podcast now. But there's 1% that maybe you're thinking about it and you're really thinking, how do I prepare myself for the worst possible moment in my life, my loved ones' lives? And I mean, it's worth the investment. It is. And, I'll say this, if you've got a gun that works for you and you've got a holster that works for you and that kind of stuff, maybe hit the pause button on the shopping spree, for the next new hot gun that's out there, and spend some money on training. So,
in another part of it, it's like, it's at the end of the day, it's still fun to go train.
Right.
Somebody's teaching you. That is still fun. You're still out shooting. There's camaraderie within your class. Like, you may not know them in the beginning, but I've never been to a gun class, and I did over 100 hours of paid instructor training last summer. And I can tell you, I never went to a class that I walked into and didn't know people. And by the end of it, I left knowing everybody and a camaraderie, and we're all there for the same thing. And, it's good stuff. It's fun. It's, I can't speak enough about training and where it's brought me as an individual, as a shooter. I don't consider myself like the doomsday guy. I just,
right.
One step further prepared than my peers.
Yeah.
I hope.
No, I think that's it. Right. I mean, we're normal people. I like to think, and I just want to do right by myself and right by my family. And, you don't, I think I said it last time, it doesn't take very much searching on the internet or on the television to see that, the world is an increasingly bad place. And there are people out there who have absolutely no reason not to like you, that would love to take everything from you up to and including your life. And, if you're listening to this podcast, and if you carry a gun for your self protection and the protection of your family and friends, you're ahead of the curve. But maybe just give serious thought to investing a little bit more, and a multi-disciplinary approach to investing a little bit more. Ian kind of hinted at the fact that not every problem is a gun problem. Maybe take that class if if your local gym offers it in, grappling or jujitsu or Krav Maga. Maybe spend the money and send your wife or your daughter through that women's self-defense class where they teach them how to, stomp on the insole of a guy who grabs them from behind, and, spend the money, invest it in try to put something in the bank account, that the figurative bank account that keeps you on this planet and keeps them on this planet a little bit longer, because God knows we need more good people. So,
and it doesn't mean that you're going to walk around cocky and confident, or that you'll even feel like you know it all. But it does at least give you a certain amount of understanding that there's some things I know to do.
Right.
There are things I know to do. I may not know everything, but I know some things, and I'm going to do those things.
Right.
In the cocky and confident, like, gun carry guy makes me really nervous.
Yeah.
There's a completely different dynamic that you need to think about when you're making the choice to carry. You're either going to do it all the time, or you're not going to do it all the time.
Right.
And if you're not going to do it all the time, are you going to be okay if something was to happen?
Right.
And that's the time that you're not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. I mean, I'll say it's not weird. It's a funny thought, right?
It's real.
It's real. Right. And I think
real.
the funny, ironic thought about that is that violence, I heard this, I'm trying to think of who heard say this the other day. Violence doesn't care about gender, age, race, creed, what you're doing, where you are, or anything else like that. Violence will generally pick the most inopportune time to rear its ugly head. And you should try to prepare yourself to deal with that whenever it is. So, yeah. Wow. I don't know. Is it wrong to end a show on a note like that? I mean, I feel like now I've depressed people, but this is real, and
Well, I think it's where I want to end is I want to end with what Ian was talking about learning things over a period of time, because we don't learn things at once. We stage things. We learn them in layers. We take them in steps. And that makes me not be overwhelmed with the idea of taking a class or learning something or getting outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
Because I'm a perfectionist. That's how I've made my living, is trying to do things perfectly in the music business as an engineer. So I'm a perfectionist, and I will get hung up in being a perfectionist and not take something because I go, I'm not going to have enough time to be great at that. But the idea that we can just work on pieces of this at a time and improve ourselves over time, it's the time value of thought.
Right.
Is what it is. The more time you put to thinking on that thing and training on that thing, then the more valuable your time in your life becomes. And we don't have to do it all at once, but we do have to start somewhere.
Well, Dennis, and into that, like, I'll say, like, there's a guy I know that he was a quote unquote gun guy, in that he had a lot of nice equipment, a lot of nice guns, optics, all the
toys,
Gucci gear to go along with them. And
Mhm.
I finally talked this guy into taking a class with me. And after a 2-day 1,000 round class, I want to say it was a pistol class, he said to me, "Well, I'm not any better." And I just spent all of that money on ammo,
right?
Intuition. Like, I'm not any better. Well, like, what I think gets overlooked is that it's not a switch, right? This isn't data that's already in your mind and the instructor is just turning it on for you to use.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving you the tools so you can take the time on your own,
right,
to practice and perfect what he's given you.
Right.
So Ian gives me X, Y, and Z in this class. I'm not any better at X, Y, and Z. I mean, maybe on Sunday afternoon after 2 days worth of it, I am doing a little bit better, but I'm not proficient in it. It's not science to me. It's not instant. It's not a muscle memory in 8 to 16 hours worth of class. There's no way. But he's given me the tools to know this is going to increase my abilities if I practice this.
It starts you on your journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing that we didn't even remotely touch on, which is a whole nother conversation, is dry fire.
Right.
Because so much can be learned just by doing your dry fire every day.
I want to do a dry fire episode. I really do. I want to sit down, and I mean, that's going to be one where everybody's like, click, next episode, right? But,
write that down, yeah.
Right. But seriously, that is a thing that costs so little and done correctly can drastically improve your ability to manipulate a weapon effectively and with accuracy and with comfort and familiarity.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And can you pull the trigger without shaking the gun?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's a thing you can practice. There's just so sight picture. There's so many things you can practice.
Oh, there's so much in it that even before you ever get to the trigger pull, that is just, when you start to break it down and the grip and presentation of it, it's like, can you do those things? And wow. Yeah. We're going to do an episode on it. It's going to be more fun than it sounds right now to everybody that's listening and already falling asleep. So, guys, I'm looking at the timer. I think we were honestly, before any editing, we're probably 2 hours and 30 minutes into this thing. So, I want to go ahead and probably go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. As always, I think we've proven that there's so much that we could talk about, and we will get to it in future episodes. Can't give you guys in the audience everything all at once. Got to keep you wanting. Got to keep you coming back, and we hope that you do. We hope that you've enjoyed it tonight. Before we get to saying goodnight to you gentlemen and finding out how people can connect with you, really, I've got 2 quotes now, and as Dennis, as you were talking a second ago, I thought, man, you're going to love this one. So here are 2 thoughts from far smarter people than me that I think really talk about what we've discussed tonight. The first one, General George S. Patton said, "An imperfect plan implemented immediately and violently will always succeed better than a perfect plan."
I love that one.
And Jocko Willink, U.S. Navy SEAL retired. This is from his book, Discipline Equals Freedom. He said, "Knowledge is the ultimate weapon. It trumps all other weapons. Thought is what wins. The mind is what wins. Knowledge is what wins. And you gain knowledge by asking questions."
Awesome.
So I can think of no better way than to expand your knowledge than by asking questions of competent, trained professionals and trainers and instructors like Ian. Those of you listening, I hope that you will visit Ian's websites. Again, those things will be in the show notes, and we'll put those up on social media so you can connect with him. In speaking with him, I know he earnestly wants to make himself available to you so that he can help you prepare for the worst possible moments in your lives. Gentlemen, thank you again for your time this evening. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
I enjoy it every time we do this. This is fun. We should do this more often. We should make a podcast. So, Mark Lancaster, Squared Away Customs.
Yes.
How can people connect with you after the show?
SquaredAwayCustoms.com is always is a great spot, because from there you can get everywhere. If not, Facebook.com/SquaredAwayCustoms or info@SquaredAwayCustoms.com.
Fantastic.
Don't forget to check out the holster finder when you're on the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a helpful tool, and it saves you shooting me. I'm happy to answer emails, but it saves you shoot me an email. We're a very small operation. There's 3 of us, and my wife part-time, as I'm counting, is 1. So
yep.
There's 3 of us. We're a small operation. So the fewer emails we take care of, the more gear we produce, and the faster you get it. So definitely using the holster finder and the FAQ and email is awesome.
Well, and I hope that our listeners go a step further and don't just use that holster finder to figure out that the Blackhawk Serpa on your your hip is complete crap. I hope that you will use the holster finder to get past the phobos in your life and reach out to Mark and his team and order something.
And don't forget a standing coupon code, Shooters Nation, at SquaredAwayCustoms.com.
That's awesome. And also, I don't want anybody to forget that for our first responders out there, our military and educators, Squared Away Customs also offers a heroes discount. So please take advantage of that. We want you guys using good gear that's going to make sure your gun is on your hip or at your side where you expect it to be, and not like the guy that I saw in a training class where he went to whip his handgun out of his holster and flung his cheap holster at the target. Everybody laughed. Don't be that guy, because in real life, the guy that you fling the holster at probably isn't going to laugh. So it might be a good distraction. Screw this OODA loop. There we go, guys. We work OODA loop right back into it. Dennis Ritchie, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate it.
It was a blast. People can find me if anybody ever wants to find me. They can find me at theartofstanding.com. I talk about encouragement because I believe that courage should not be an accident.
Absolutely.
That's what I do.
It's a fantastic story. Actually, you talk about something. There's the positive thing to leave tonight with is, if this was all doom and gloom for you, go out and hit Dennis's blog. I'm not going to hide the fact Dennis is my father-in-law. I married up, and I married into a fantastic, very talented family. But more importantly, Dennis and my mother-in-law, Susie, have walked through some incredibly challenging situations in their lives. And if you're looking for something that would encourage you and maybe help you face something difficult going on in your world, there you go. There's the positive message. Head over there, take a look at it. And let's try to help you, get on your feet and face whatever's going on in your world right now. So that's it. Another episode in the books, and I can't wait to do the next one. I'm really looking forward to editing this one and getting it out there. Just so our listeners know, we are now on the iTunes, the Stitcher, the Google Play music store, which is a really cool accomplishment, I think. I watched that for about 4 days, wondering when Google would approve the podcast and thinking it's got guns in it. They're not going to approve it.
Refresh.
Right. Yeah. But hey, they did. And we appreciate them doing that. So you can find us on all the major, predominant, sources of podcasting and stuff. Again, we're new at this, episode 2. I hope you've enjoyed it, but, I know that we can always do better. So shoot me an email if you want at shootersnationradio@gmail.com and let us know what you thought. If you've got ideas for a show, shoot those over. If you've got questions for, our guests, you can do that. And I would be glad.
Guest ideas too.
Yeah. Guest ideas. And if you've got contacts of people that you think that we ought to include on here, let me know. I'm always glad to reach out to them and try to get them on. Good, bad, or ugly, let us know how we're doing. Without your feedback, we can't do any better. And if you like it, please spread the word. Tell your friends about us and, get more listeners in here. We would appreciate you doing that. So with that, I will sign off for the evening. I hope that you all have an excellent week ahead. And by all means, above all else, please be safe. Thank you for listening.
The preceding segment was a production of the Shooters Nation podcast. Visit us online at shootersnation.com.